Hey, Coach Lee here. This is one of the favorite videos that I have ever made. I love events, I love data, and I love breaking it all down. But this video is all about the 24-hour solo, non-drafting, closed circuit, outdoor, and one indoor TT. It's an amazing event to think that you can just run a time trial for 24 hours. It's one of it's definitely one of the things, it's one of the highlights of my coaching career to be able to coach. And I have several athletes that have been doing these for years. They continue to hit PRs, they continue to get better. But if we step back for 2025 in America, this was a banner year. So I want to cover 7 events and really get into the science and really think about the 24-hour TT. So we're going to cover Matthew Left Hand, of course. We're going to cover his Sebring, where he launched his ultra career on the world stage last year, or this year in February, at Sebring. We're going to cover his indoor virtual challenge, where he just destroyed all records and had an amazing performance. We're going to talk about Psycho to 24. We're going to talk about Mid-Atlantic 24 and Calvin's Challenge 24. So I want to look at 7 different events and break down the winners of each of those events, including Borrego Springs from this past weekend. If you don't know me, I love this stuff. I work with a lot of ultra athletes, just helping them in their training and on event day to be the best that they can be. So let's jump in here. So I want to start in 2024. So Psycho had the World Ultra Cycling Association, WUCA. In 2024, they had their big event at in North Carolina. It's Psycho. So let's start actually at the end of 2024 and then jump into 2025, because 2024 really sets the stage for 2025. Now, I was there for this event. This is Ben Sweet, a fantastic kid, a Canadian, a young fella. No one had ever heard of him, and he shows up on the scene. And this was a battle between Jimmy Toner and Ben Sweet for that ultimate prize. And we can kind of see some data points that we want to talk about here. So 492 miles in Psycho 2024 for that WUCA championship events. The watts, I'm really confused about the watts. So I'm pulling data, so I'm trying to get data from different sources, and I look at a lot of data. So the 143 does not make any sense to me at all. That seems really light. Okay. So when you expect to see, when you get to close to, 500 miles in these 24-hour TTs, I expect this number to be a lot closer to 180, 190, or even 200. 20.5 miles an hour, a 79 cadence. And I got this data from Strava here. So he was on the bike 23 hours and 22 minutes. So a valiant effort from Ben Sweet. Now, when everybody that does these events, the 24-hour TT, there's kind of 3 fundamental different ways that you can attack these. One is just a straight up race. So you peg the guys that you need to track, that you need to be in contention with, and you race that person. Now, these type of races tend to go out really hard, and then everything calms down, and then it's the war of attrition to the end. So that's the first way, just a straight up race. The second way is to approach it just like a TT, like if you were doing a 40K TT or a 20K TT, in that you want to get your most miles and PR. And so the race situations, this is very important. The race situations often don't involve setting records, often don't involve PRs, because you're going out so hard that you suffer in that back half. And then the suffering doesn't make up for all the effort that you did at the beginning in the 24-hour TTs. It's the same way with the 40K TT. And so the race does not is not the optimal way to produce PRs to get your maximum mileage on a course. The second way, just straight up TT it, right? We're going to figure out laps, watts, race pace, and we're going to just struggle to stay on the bike to get our PR mileage. The third way is a wing and a prayer. And I've seen this a lot. I've been a lot of start lines at events at this, and I'll talk to people. Hey, what's your strategy for this? I'm like, I'm just going to go out, right? No problems. This video and the things that I coach for is really about setting PRs. It's about thinking about the data. It's about thinking about your training and what you need to do to set PRs in these events. Okay. So we got Ben. So the most important thing to understand about this data is that this is a straight up race. So he is racing, and this year it was Jimmy Toner, and they were just going lap for lap, just battling it out. And so you can see sort of the collapse in data. So we have 171 watts, and we see this trend line go down, and he ends. So this is the first 4 hours, right? 171 watts. The last 4 hours, 146 watts. One of the biggest things that we know from data that if you want your PR, the first 4 hours and the last 4 hours and everything in between has to be pretty much on pair. So if your race pace is 160 watts, you do those first 4 hours with 160 watts. If you want your PRs, then that last 4 hours has to be 160 watts. You can't do your first 4 hours at 160 watts and your last 4 hours at 120 watts and think you're going to get a PR. So that red line is one of the things that I often look at. So this is his power data. Again, you can see he's stopping very little. So that is a stop. That is a stop. That is a stop. And you can see that he was off the bike, whatever that is. He was on the bike 23 hours and 22 minutes. And now this was a straight up race. And so, Ben was really professionalized in terms of he had an aero kit on, aero helmet on. He was all aero. And I'm pretty sure he had a disc wheel. But he was doing laps and he had his girlfriend there and she was, holding out a bag. And so, half mile down here, Ben is getting rid of all of his stuff, just dumping it on the road, which his girlfriend went and picked up. And then he is flying by, grabbing the bag and keep going. Just straight up like, he's racing the Tour de France, right? So there was very little stopping time, like just when he really had to use the restroom bag. So that's one thing to note. We can see that his speed trend does drop a little bit, and very typical, his cadence does drop slightly a little bit. But this did get Ben the North American WUCA title. He got a jersey, and it was great to meet Ben for the first time. I had never met him before. I actually wasn't even following him, or he wasn't even on my radar. Just a young kid, and you can follow him on Strava and Instagram. He's a great kid, loves the bike, which is awesome. I love to see that. All right. So now, oh boy, that brings us to Sebring, February 2025, where this other guy that no one had ever heard of before, Matthew Left Hand, races his first outdoor 24-hour TT. And just blew any records that we had in America for outdoor on a closed circuit like this format. Just blew the records off that, and so just took everybody by surprise. It was an amazing performance. And so 574 miles on this closed course. And so the loop was like 3.4 miles loop around a golf course, right? So when they used to do Sebring, they used to have this option to go way out and do, some big loops out into the county. But this time it's a very fast course. It's a very good course for those of you wanting to get your PRs. Sebring is a great course. I will be there this year with some athletes in support of them, but there's going to be a lot of people there. It's going to be a great race to watch in 2026, especially after this massive performance. So Matthew Left Hand, 574 miles. 23.9 miles, 69 cadence, and he does this event around 233 watts. I'm not quite sure. He's able to stay on the bike, so he only has 11 minutes off the bike. And so that's one of the big things to consider, is that if you want your PR, you have to stay on the bike, right? So some people will wear condom catheters for men, but it's all about staying on the bike as much as possible. Like the old saying goes, slow miles are better than no miles, right? So you have to stay on the bike. And Matthew, with only 11 minutes off the bike in this event, just ripped it up. Now, here's what was fascinating. So for anybody who's ever watched one of my 24-hour TT videos, this is exactly what we don't want to see. We don't want to see this collapsing red line. When we see the collapsing red line, we're not getting as many miles out there as we can given a certain power. So if Matthew this was his first big event. So, you know, how I coach for race day preparation, Matthew actually, in my mind, could have gotten more miles on this day if he did not go out so strong. So if we look at the first 4 hours, he's at 264. If we look at the last 4 hours, he's 196. So this is a massive collapse in data. Also, want to note, all the data that I'm working with is publicly made available. I don't have any inside sources. I'm not taking data. But like they are all putting this data up on the internet for anybody to download and look at. So I love to look at data. I'll even do like ultra trail running, right? I'll download that data to see how they ran this course versus this course, right? You know, just because I love data and I love event data especially. And I love the ultra data. It's my favorite. But so he starts off at 264 and 196. His speed drops a little bit, and his cadence drops a little bit as well, which is what we can expect in all ultra athletes, no matter how fit you are. Like, it's pretty much going to slow down towards the end of the race. But I really dug, I made a video on Matthew Left Hand's performance, and I really dug into that data because I really wanted to understand it. In terms of like what was going on with his physiology. And so what's fascinating about this event, so it was his first event, but he's training in Utah. And so I can just look at myself and a lot of athletes that I work with. Humidity destroys me, right? So it's not so much the heat, it's the humidity. So if my FTP is 300 on a dry day, I go out 90% humidity. My FTP is now 230. That dramatic, not exaggerating, simply because of just my body cannot handle that respiration. My cellular respiration shuts down. And so I was looking at his data. I really dug into it. And I was looking at what his heart rate was for his race pace in Utah. And then I was looking at what his race pace was in Florida, and it was 10 beats higher in Florida. And so now that's where you have to make the decision. You have to say like, oh, this heat, this humidity of Florida, it is affecting me in certain ways. And the science says that it should affect me in certain ways, and it affects all of us a little differently. So then he could have made a decision to drop that down. So those first 4 hours, say if he did those, 258 watts or even 255 watts, that would enable him not to go as low as he did in those last 4 hours. He would have kept that energy and kept that up, right? But he was trained to a specific wattage, and if he would have done this race in Utah, he would have stayed 264 all the way across. He would not have had the collapse. And we know this for a fact because we're going to talk about his virtual indoor record next for the 24 hours. And it's one of the most amazing data that you'll ever see. All right, so we look at this. And so 264, 196. So there is a collapse. So if I'm a coach, I'm looking at this when he gets back to me. I just simply say like, hey, for this race, you went out too strong, right? So maybe dial it back to 255 and hold 255 all the way across, that gets you more miles than the collapsing red line methodology. All right. But amazing achievement. 574 miles for the American record now on his first attempt. And I believe the person who holds this type of race, this outdoor closed circuit TT road race, I believe that's held by Chris Strasser, and it's over 600 miles. But Matthew, again, if we look at the data suggests that he actually could have gotten more miles on this day. But incredible performance. I had athletes at Sebring, and so I was at here, and I was live tracking it. And I was like, who is this Matthew left-hand guy? It's like, man, it seems like he's going out way too strong, and I kept waiting for him to pop and pop and pop, and he never did. And so it was like one of the most memorable live tracking experiences of my life. All right, so brilliant ride right there. That 574 is the American record for outdoor 24-hour TT solo, non-drafting. Amazing achievement. Now here's where we get to his indoor effort. Look at this, baby. He starts off at 277 and he pretty much holds that all the way through to 275. He's only 6 minutes off the bike, gets in 658 miles, 273 average watts for this bad boy at 27.4 miles an hour, right? And so that's what's fascinating about this data is like this came right after Sebring. So this is what he's trained to do in Utah, is to do 24-hour events somewhere around 270 watts for his race pace, which is absolutely incredible. But so he nails it right here because, you don't have the environmental conditions. You don't have the humidity. You can air condition your room to whatever you want. Highly controlled environment. But what I love about this event is that, I don't know if any of you followed this. I think a lot of you did. This was a real serious indoor event. They did everything that they could to try to replicate an outdoor experience indoors. So they put him through the tests where he had to get an aero drag number. What was his drag number? They had to give him a special trainer. They gave him a sensor so that they knew that when he was in the sleds or when he was sitting, right? So that was a big thing. They were going to slow him down if he was sitting up, and they were going to give him more speed if he was in the sleds. So this was, as close as you could come to replicating an outdoor experience on an indoor bike. One of the things that I love about Matthew is that he has really professionalized the experience of being an ultra. So when we go back to Sebring, he did pretty much, and he was very vocal about this on his Instagram. Follow him on Instagram. But exactly the fueling that he did. So it was like 98% liquid fueling for that 24-hour event. And he might have chewed on some stuff. But fundamentally, his rides, his achievements are fueled all liquid. Now that is not for everybody. How do you know if you're an all liquid person, or do you have to mix it up? You have to know in training. So training is the best way to learn that. You do not want to show up on event day and try a novel strategy. I can't stress that enough. You have to figure out your diet on the bike for event day in training. That is key. So Matthew really worked hard to dial all of that in. And so that's what I mean by professionalism, and that he's bringing this professionalism to the 24-hour ultra scene in America in ways that we had not seen it before. Trail running, ultra trail running, like 100-mile events, things like that. For the last 5 years, they've been going through a renaissance. They've been getting lots of sponsors, sold out races, but they have really been professionalizing their training, but also their event nutrition and course times. Course times that have been held for 15 years are just dropping or just plummeting through the floor. I mean, they're just destroying it in the trail running world. Now, Matthew, when we think about him as an athlete, he has a pro Peloton FTP. I mean, we can see that in the data. So if you're cruising around, when you're doing your race pace for these 24-hour TTs, for most people, that's going to be their upper zone 1. Some people can develop a lower zone 2 that they can then hold the entire time. And so Matthew, we can, once we understand that, then, we can guess his FTP pretty accurately, actually. And so if Matthew was scooped up as a young man, say a teenager, and identified with cycling talent and just superior genetics, then he would have spent probably his career, his 20s, racing in Europe as a professional athlete, if not even the Tour de France. I mean, he is just an absolute amazing athlete. He's not doing secret workouts. He's fueling his training correctly. He's fueling his day correctly. He's dialing in everything off the bike, which I do. But there's no way that you're ever going to turn me into a Matthew left hand, right? There's no secret workouts. There's doing the work, absolutely. But he is just an athletic phenomenon in American ultra cycling right now, and the likes of which we really have never seen as an American. And it's great. These guys, these athletes are rare. The higher you get on the athletic level, the athletic ladder, the fewer there are. There's a lot of guys like me out there. Let's just put it that way. There's a lot. But, when we get to Matthew, these are singular talents that are kind of generational, right? So it's great to see Matthew's data. And so on this event, this indoor virtual event, he sets his Strava says it's like he set 14 Guinness World Records on this event and numerous WUCA events. And so he set, I don't know, maybe 20 world records and Guinness Book of World Records in this one single event. And so it was an amazing experience. For those of us who watched it, I watched him do it. I was there. He had judges that were there to watch him do this the whole time. So it was an amazing event, and we're just so glad that he did it. It was fantastic to watch. And this data is just about as perfect can get. Stays on the bike and keeps that power steady from the beginning to the end. That's what we're looking for. Now we have Calvin's Challenge. So that was the next big event that came through. And this Kurt Alteret, who I work with, this was his first year as an ultra endurance athlete. So this was kind of his launch for his career in 2025. And that we had the Calvin's Challenge. And he sets the course record at 430 miles, wins overall. He has 162 watts, average watts for the entire time. And he was only off the bike 15 minutes, which is really good for a 24-hour event, right? You want to get that 15 minutes as most. Try to get 5-10 minutes off the bike, but you got to stay on the bike. Great cadence, around 65 RPM. Great cadence. That's a great ultra cadence to do. But yeah, so he crushed it. What I love about Kurt's data is that, so I love negative splits. And so when I give a lot of endurance workouts, they're all within the concept of this negative splits progression. So, you go out for a zone 2 workout, you start in lower zone 2, then after an hour, you go up to mid zone 2, and then maybe the last 20 minutes, you do upper zone 2. The progressive idea is all about, getting your mind used to the idea of working harder through time, not getting easier through time, but working harder through time. And when you start to nail that in training, that will translate to your events. And so what I love about this is, when we see world records on the track, everything is negative splits, right? So, if they're going around 4 times. The first time is going to be their easiest lap. Their last lap is going to be their hardest lap, right? And so the concept of negative splits is what my coaching, one of the things that I love to do and coach athletes to do for their best time. It's the concept of, like, for those of you who do the 20-minute FTP test, if you do negative splits, you're going to get your highest wattage for the day, meaning that you're starting below FTP, then you're working through FTP, and then your last 3 minutes is like a VO2 effort. If you nail that, you're going to get your best FTP number. If you start at VO2 and then die 1,000 deaths to finish that 20 minutes, you're not going to get a very good number. If you flip it, negative splits, then boom, you got it. So this is what Kurt does for his 24-hour event. And I look at a lot of data. This was the only time, Kurt, to my knowledge, is the only athlete that did a 24-hour TT negative splits. There might be some other athletes out there. Send me your data. I would love to see it. If you did a negative split 24-hour TT, I would love to see it. But so here's what Kurt did. His first 4 hours, 163. His last 4 hours, 168. So he sets in real nice with this 163 race pace, and he slowly brings it up throughout the course and crushes that negative splits, giving him his best time ever. And so when we look at if Matthew ever wanted to break his indoor virtual record, that's what I would recommend. I would recommend him starting maybe at 265 watts, then raising it, and try to finish those last 4 hours around 285 watts, right? So that would be the kind of the thing that, maybe the only thing that Matthew could do to, he can raise his race pace, of course, which means raising his FTP, his threshold, building a bigger aerobic engine, or he can kind of hack the science and do negative splits. So that would be a suggestion, something to try. It's definitely hard because, listen, when this works in a 40K TT, but listen, there's a lot of things that can come and punch you in the face all throughout here. So it's a bold effort. It's courage. But basically, the idea with these 24-hour TTs, you cannot start off too strong. And too strong in a race pace scenario for an ultra, too strong, you might not even know you're going too strong, because too strong for a 24-hour event feels really easy. If you're doing a century and you're going out too strong, you learn really quick in 20 minutes that you're going too hard. But in a 24-hour TT, it's hard, people. And so we really use the science and really dial in his race pace. And then we start easier and slower with the idea that we can end faster and stronger. And that's what Kurt did in Calvin's challenge. Some of my favorite data from 2025 is right there, people. All right. Then we had the Mid-Atlantic. Kevin Liberacki, another fantastic gentleman, really launches his ultra career in 2025. And he's 59 years old and just an amazing athlete. And so what I love about this is that I coached the winner of the 2024 Mid-Atlantic at 405 miles. So my athlete in 2024 gets 405 miles, wins the overall, but he was the only person to break 400 in 2024. Kevin Liberacki comes along, destroys the previous record, right? And just crushes it at 442 miles, somewhere around 152 watts. That might have been like 160 watts. I'm looking at a lot of data trying to put this together. And as we know, like if you take the same file and put it into this software, it's going to say one thing. If you put it into Strava, it's going to say this thing. You know, there's so many arguments of like, why does my Garmin data look this way? Why does my Strava data look this way? And so there's a lot of these things that, you know, I'm thinking about and trying to have to go through. But this event's going to be somewhere around 160 watts, somewhere between 150 and 160. But he stayed on the bike 23 hours, 28 minutes. And so starts off really strong. His first 4 hours, 167 minutes. The last 4 hours, he does 152 watts. I track laps, so I love splits, like to track, like what was this lap? What was this lap? His lowest lap for the day was 147. He does talk about that he was dehydrated in the middle of this and that it was a brutal race in the middle and he had to adjust some things to get back on. But, you know, it shows grit, it shows determination. And, you know, if I see this data as a coach, I'm like, yep, I know exactly what you can do to get more miles next time in your 24-hour TT. Okay. So, but Mid-Atlantic, once again, I looked at the records. This was not a course record. But, you know, again, first overall, great effort. Over 40 mile, you know, like 35 miles more than the previous year. So great effort, Kevin. And that brings us back to Kurt. So we have the Psycho 24. Kurt comes back and he gets in his own personal PR. Remember, this is his first year as an ultra athlete. And so he gets his personal PR at Psycho, which is a difficult course. No one has ever ridden over 500 miles at Psycho. So it's a difficult course. And I believe the course record was Ben Sweet at 492 miles. So it's a difficult course. You know, they got wind. It gets cold at night. You know, a lot of things are thrown at you. So it is a slower course. But he comes back, gets first overall, 461 miles. He's off the bike 26 minutes this time. So when he rode Calvin's Challenge, he had a canyon that was, you know, modified for aero. He was really emboldened by Calvin's Challenge, so he went straight up TT. So now when he does the Psycho, he's on a straight up speedster, okay? The problem is that it does take a while to get that fit dialed in so that you can stay on the bike for 24 hours. So Kurt is great at staying on the bike. But when he got to Psycho with a newer bike, he had it about a month or so. It maybe 2 months, right? It was not ideal for a 24-hour race. And so that whenever he did stop for a little bit longer just to loosen up his body and then get back on that TT. But still, it's a very fast bike. And so I really look forward to, you know, working in the off season to dial in that fit and get him ready and get him fired up for that. But he pulls out around 160 average watts, starts at 160 for those first 4 hours. And then the last 4 hours is 156. So that is, you know, that right there is an amazing achievement, right? Again, we want to keep that red line as flat as possible in a TT strategy of if you're racing it as a TT specialist, right? For PRs, for maximum mileage, we want to keep that power line as flat as possible or raise it so that it goes up at the end. All right. So great effort. But let's look at Kurt's kind of season, because this is what's fascinating is that, so here's his season. So here's Calvin's Challenge. Here's Natchez. So he does Natchez, and he does Natchez with an eye on this. And so he's not racing Natchez necessarily 100% all out. He takes the race lead and backs off a little bit. to finish the race. But he got first in Natchez with one of the highest and fastest times ever on the course. And then here is Psycho 24. And now he travels all over the world. He's a husband, he's a wife, but we can kind of see what he does over the year in terms of CTL. So CTL, chronic training load, is your 90 days, 3 months picture average of your daily TSS. So the higher the red bar, the more you're working. All right. And so we can kind of see, like, here's 80 TSS. We can kind of see where we keep Kurt, right? So he gets up, we bring him up here, we taper him down, boom. He has some travel, some other things going on. So he does a kind of a big taper down into this rest hole. And then we build him back up for Natchez. And then we taper him. He has more travel in here, so that's kind of a big taper. And then we bring him up to, this was Psycho. So you can kind of see, like, you know, ultra athletes. And I talk to a lot of ultra athletes, and a lot of people come to me. And, you know, they're, you know, driving a CTL. CTL is an art form. There's different ways to build CTL. There's different ages of people. An older person should not, you know, the older of a master's athlete you are, you should not be carrying massive CTLs. And it's all about, you know, to get better is all about digging and recovering, right? So people who have a better 24-hour process, they're getting better sleep, they're getting better nutrition, they're you know, have a great off the bike life and a great training plan, they can tend to carry a little bit higher CTL. Now, Kurt's all over the place, traveling all over the place, doing a million different things. He owns several businesses. You know, he is the busiest man. He's one of the busiest men I've ever met. And so, you know, you have to kind of, like, that's where I, as a coach, have to make some decisions about their CTL. Like, where do we kind of want to establish his workload week by week, right? So we're coaching the human, we're looking at data, but we're always coaching the human. And that's very important. And so for Kurt to ride in, you know, and get his personal best at 461 miles, and take the first overall at 80 CTL, many ultra athletes would call that loco, would call that crazy, but it's not. Many ultra athletes who are just staying in the 100, you know, the low 100s for most of the year, they, you know, you know, you could, it's all based on the individual, of course, your age, all that great stuff, but you could end up, you know, with more little injuries, you know, getting sick more, you know, those types of things. And then, you know, your aerobic engine is just not growing anymore. And so that we want to grow that aerobic engine so that we can raise your race pace. And if you're carrying too high of a CTL, that level of fatigue is actually the enemy of growing that aerobic engine. And so that's where a coach has to come in and look at your data, look at your life factors, look at your 24-hour, all that kind of stuff to see who you are as an athlete and kind of make some adjustments and experiment a little bit. So we'll experiment with Kurt's data next year, but that's kind of a big picture. Now, let's end with Borrego Springs. This is Patrick Haley's data. So the winner was Sebastian Mayer in Germany, and he does not publish his data publicly, but Patrick puts his data out there for everyone to see. So the Borrego this year, the 24-hour TT, for those of you who live tracked it, it was neck and neck. And so this data is very representative of what Sebastian probably got, because I think that the finish, they were like within a mile of each other for that 24-hour period. So this is great data to look at for this. And what I love, once again, so they're racing each other, okay? So this is not, if you want your PR mileage, if you want your maximum mileage, this is not the right strategy. But they're not, this is a race. This is who can beat who. And if you track their data, they were just right on each other's heels the entire time. They were neck and neck the whole entire time. And so we have the first 4 hours with Patrick at 2:26, and we have the last 4 hours at 1:69. They have cleared the field and they are far out in front. Maybe both made the conscious decision to relax a little bit, but we can definitely see that this is the last 4 hours at 1:69. Is quite a big drop in watts. And that's the thing, if for maximum mileage, we do not want to do. But he's around 202 watts is what we would expect. Cruising 23 miles an hour, a little bit of a higher cadence. That's an interesting. So, if he came to me and say like, Coach Lee, what kinds of things do we want to look at? Well, we would talk about his race pace, his strategy. But I would say like, let's see what we can do at, a little bit lower. Let's drop that a little bit. Let's just see what we can do a little bit lower. But he's on the bike 23 hours, 12 minutes. And yeah, this is what we'd expect to be. And he got second place. But it was a great effort. It was really fun to live track and watch him and Sebastian just go at it, neck and neck and drive each other's. Now let's just see. Is there anything else I can say about Patrick's data? Well, not necessarily that, they go out pretty hard and then they pay for it in the last 4 hours. The thing is that, when you go out too hard, then the black holes that where every ultra athlete goes through in that back half, right? Those black holes, they get a little bit bigger. That little bit of nausea gets everything is amplified in a negative way if you go out too hard. You find yourself spending more time off the bike than what you need to do. You find yourself going down that dark black hole and spending a little too much time down there before you come out, right? So it's all about energy management, these 24-hour TTs, and managing your energy as much as possible to really help you in that end, right? So a great example is I had a new athlete with me. He went and did Calvin's challenge. He really strong athlete. And so he starts off not listening to anything his coach says. And so he does literally 5 hours at zone 3. Okay. So that's the definition of tempo. When you do 5 hours at zone 3, that means you're done. You kind of just roll back to the house. So he does 5 hours at zone 3. He's leading the race, but that level of effort so fatigued him. He pulled way too much glycogen from those muscles that he could not then put back. He had to spend so much time off the bike in those back. And I think at the Calvin Challenge, he got 330 miles on the day. But his physiology, if he would have paced it different, he definitely could have ridden over 400 miles. And if I remember correctly, he doesn't even make the full 24 hours. He goes into the truck like at 22 hours to get a little snack and sit a second, and then just passes out, right? So energy management is absolutely key when it comes to these 24-hour TTs and getting your best, right? Hey, but if you'd like to talk about any of that, let's talk about it. I have the 24-hour workouts that you need to be doing. I have the nutrition plan. I've got it all. We can make 2026 your best year ever. Take care, everybody. Thanks for watching.